I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're exploring a wonderful book, a magical book, a book of nonfiction. It is called He Is Here, 25 Days of Christmas Devotions. It's written by a wonderful author by the name of Reverend Browning Montgomery Wood. This inspirational devotional book takes readers on a 25-day-long journey through the Christmas story, offering fresh insights into the birth of Jesus and the profound impact of this world-changing event. Join us as we delve into these meaningful reflections that will enrich your Christmas season and deepen your faith. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his wonderful book. The links are below this interview. Reverend, thank you so much for being our guest here today on Spotlight.
Good to be with you, Logan. Thank you for having me.
This is a great book to have a devotional for each day of Christmas, as opposed to just the chocolate advent calendars where you get your piece of candy and get a little bit of a lesson on Christmas. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind it.
Well, the inspiration started during COVID, as many things did. There was a lot of people who were disconnected and not feeling connected with their relationships. And so I decided I would do something for Christmas that year that would kind of help people be encouraged since they couldn't be with family and connected the way they had been. So this is 2020, and I went ahead and wrote the 25 days of Christmas devotions as posts on my Facebook page.
Hmm.
There was such a response to that people said, "Hey, would you ever consider putting this into a book?" And I said, "That sounds like a good idea. I think I'll do that." So I went ahead and I put them all into one book and finished that in about 2022. Released the book and shared it with friends, and there was just a great outpouring of appreciation and love for the writing. And so I've made it available through the distributors that I have now.
Awesome. That's great. Talk to us a little bit about the themes and the passages that are included in your devotionals.
Well, I think one of the things I really wanted to focus on is the stories behind the story itself. I think
Mhm.
when we hear about Mary, when we hear about Joseph, we think, okay, a meek woman from an obscure village. But we don't really think about the context behind what Mary was really going through. What would it have been like to be a young teenage mother out of wedlock who is now pregnant with a child in a culture that does not sync with that idea?
Mhm.
What would it have been like for Joseph to be the father of a child that would have readily been known as not his own,
Mhm.
except by his own adoption? What would he have gone through? What would he have felt? It takes into mind several characters that maybe most people haven't heard of, like Simeon, who went ahead and declared to the people that this message of the gospel is now going to go to a group of people called the Gentiles, everybody who's non-Jewish. Well, that would have been disruptive to the Jewish culture because they didn't have a relationship with the Gentiles that was positive. So it looks at the stories behind the story itself, the miracle of the virgin birth, the idea of Bethlehem, and everything that took place there.
Yeah. And the impact of the birth of Jesus. I mean, I love the Christmas card that reads, of all the armies that ever marched, all the navies that ever sailed, of all the kings that ever reigned, no single life has affected this earth as profoundly as that one solitary life.
Yeah, yeah, great idea, and that's what this is. This is a story that for thousands of years kings and carpenters and anybody and everybody for thousands of years and over multiple generations was waiting for the day that he arrived. And when he finally does arrive, that's why I entitled it He Is Here,
Yeah.
because he does arrive and he shows up in a way that nobody expected.
Exactly. And also, we count down to Christmas, and it's usually the arrival of Santa Claus,
Yeah.
which is great for little kids, but it's good for children of all ages, young, and old, to remember that the Christmas story is not about Santa Claus. It's about the birth of Jesus and
Right.
how much more profound and how much more impactful that is than anybody who's delivering presents around the world in a single night, right?
Yeah, and what better way to reflect on the Christmas story than to reflect on the characters who are in the Christmas story?
Yeah.
And so, what I tried to do in these 25 days is say, all right, you've heard this story all your life, you've listened to it all your life. you've gone to church and heard it all your life, but what's really going on behind the scenes? And so I delve into some areas that most people probably haven't thought about. I talk about some sides of the story that most people haven't considered. And it gives them a chance to walk daily through that 25-day process and experience something new. And they can come back to it every year.
Yeah.
And it's something that once they come back to, I mean, I read it again every year and I was like, oh, I forgot I wrote about that. That's such a neat insight. Thanks, Lord.
Yeah, absolutely. Day one, let's talk about your day one devotional when you start reading the 25 Days of Christmas.
Yeah, so the day one has to do with this, what's in a name? What's in a name? And it's actually a description of the genealogy. Luke starts off with this genealogy that he presents us with. And most people think, well, what a waste of time to go over genealogy. But I talk about in the first chapter how people use organizations like 23andMe and other DNA identification kits nowadays to identify their genetic line. Why? Because it's important. It's something they want to know the history of. And so Luke does this amazing job of presenting this genealogy so that we have a history lesson of where Jesus came from. And
Mm.
it looks back, it sees King David, it looks all the way back to Abraham. And so he lays this out for us. And then we say, what's in a name? And the truth is, everything's in a name, right? That name represents, and his name, of course, became the greatest name of all.
Wonderful, wonderful. Tell us a little bit about your ministry.
Well, what we do is right now I'm working with a global missions ministry called Berrywood Ministries, and we focus on doing ministry in East Africa. And now we've gone into Pakistan as well as into southern India. And we take what's called the Jesus Film by Campus Crusade, and we go into these villages that nobody goes into. We give our disciples, we give them a motorcycle and a solar backpack, and they go off into the bush where nobody's been before, and they show this movie called the Jesus Film in their native language. And it's a film that people have never seen before. Most of them have never seen a film at all before,
Right.
which seems unreal in our day and age because, we all carry one of these around, right? And so they go into the bush and they share the Jesus Film, and then we set up churches in the surrounding area based on quality leadership that develops out of that area. We also do HIV and AIDS awareness education. We dig water wells, fresh water. And then we also have opportunities to do education in the schools. So we're multi, even feeding the hungry through famine relief.
Wonderful. Well, you're truly doing God's work there in
Thank
all
you.
of the humanitarian efforts that you undertake. Of course, the birth of Jesus is important, but perhaps even more important is the death of Jesus.
Yeah.
And you've got a book about that too, A Walk with Christ to the Cross, 40 Days of Easter Devotions. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is something I actually wrote before I wrote the 25 Days of Christmas Devotions, but I finally have been asked by enough people to put it into a book. It started as an experience that could happen within a church where they go through the 40 stations of the cross at the church. But what I decided to do is this year I decided to put it into book form, and it'll be released this Easter season in 2025. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with people as well.
Wonderful. And tell us a couple of the stories there that are unique in your Easter devotional.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me was the sponge. There's this point at which there's a sponge that is raised up to his mouth
Yeah.
and it's got bitter gall in it. You probably recall that story.
Mhm.
And what we don't know and what we probably don't understand is that that sponge that was put on the end of that Roman spear was what the Romans used to clean themselves after defecating and using the bathroom. And so it's this nasty story of how the last thing that Jesus would taste in his mouth would be human excrement and filth, and that the sin of the world was so great that he even bore something like that. It's not a fun story to tell, but you know what? It's something we didn't think about, something we didn't know. But it was part of a Roman's gear. It came with their kind of their security belt, right? With their knife and their spear and their dagger. They also had a sponge that was issued. So the likelihood that he was, the last taste in his mouth was something like that is disgusting to us, but
Yeah.
something we didn't know. And
Yeah.
people can read about that and go, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. And also for Christians like myself, we always thought that was at least one bit of mercy that
Mm,
was shown Jesus while on the cross to give a sip of what I always presumed was wine
yeah,
with
yeah.
Timothy
Sure,
gall.
go. Yeah, it's a sour
Um,
wine.
Yeah, and it turns out to be it was another humiliation. And of
Exactly.
course, that's part of the degradation of Jesus and
Yeah.
what makes his resurrection and his love for us all the
Yeah.
more profound.
Yeah.
The Reverend has written two wonderful books here. The one we've been primarily focusing on today is He Is Here, 25 Days of Christmas Devotions. It's written by the Reverend Browning Montgomery Wood. It is an inspiring devotional book that takes readers on a 25-day journey through the story of Christmas, offering fresh insights into the birth of Jesus and the profound impact of this world-changing event. Like we said at the beginning, it goes a lot farther than the Advent calendar and gives you information and anecdotes and stories and facts about Jesus's birth and those around him that you never even dreamed of. Reverend, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, Logan. It's a real pleasure to be with you, and thanks for your time.
I appreciate your time. It was great talking to you. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time until next time on Spotlight.